One ring to rule them all. One ring to find them. One ring to bring them all. And in the darkness, find them.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the first ever episode of Film Philosophy, where we use fiction to bring facts into focus. So today's episode will be on Lord of the Rings, asking the question, what is the true power of the One Ring? So sit back, relax, and let's take a trip into Middle-earth. Understanding the Ring. Before we get into the deep stuff on the Ring's power, let's make sure we all have a basic understanding of the Ring. The Ring of Power, as it is referred to, was constructed by Sauron the Deceiver in the Second Age, after he helped forge 19 other Rings of Power. The purpose of its creation was to manipulate the other 19 rings to serve Sauron. This didn't go to plan. The other wearers sensed his intent and removed their rings. Well, not all of them did. This one ring was designed to rule over all others, to manipulate the wearers to be bound to Sauron's will. The idea behind its construction was domination and control over others, which is something worth noting. Sauron's plan didn't work, otherwise none of the events of the movie would have taken place, but the One Ring was still an immensely powerful artifact and had profound effects on Middle-earth. But to understand the ring's true nature, we need to go back all the way to ancient Greece and Plato. That's because the Ring of Power is the ideological descendant of Plato's Ring of Gyges. The Ring of Power is a transformation and I'd argue an improvement upon its predecessor, but the original comes with a philosophical outline which helps understand the ring's function. The Ring of Gyges is a thought experiment used by Glaucon in Plato's Republic in order to determine whether justice is good in and of itself or whether justice is a means to an end, a way to stop more powerful people taking what they want at your expense. The power of the ring was to give the wearer invisibility and was supposed to be used by Gyges, a shepherd from Lydia, to usurp and kill the king and marry the queen. Essentially, it offers a removal of culpability. No one sees what you do, so you can get away with whatever you want. So a magic ring that lets you go invisible and do whatever you want. Does that sound familiar? The power of the ring. Some of you might think the power is clearly invisibility, but that's where you're wrong. Well, kind of. Invisibility is important to both stories, otherwise it wouldn't be in there. But the power of the ring is not in what it lets you do, but in what it lets you think you can do. Glaucon even shows the true power of the ring when he says, "No man can be imagined to be of such an iron nature that he would stand fast in justice. No man would keep his hands off what was not his own when he could safely take what he liked out of the market, or go into houses and lie with anyone at his pleasure, or kill or release from prison whom he would, and in all respects be like a god among men." Then Glaucon even says, the actions of the just would be as the actions of the unjust. They would both come at last to the same point. What Glaucon affirms is that justice is only a means to an end, though, that we are simply not strong enough to overpower the will of others. You want to take someone's house? Well, they don't want you to take the house, so it could end in a blood feud. Or you end up living in a society where someone will come and usurp you from your throne, or whatever it may be. Justice prevents harm done to you just as much as it prevents you doing harm to others. And I would argue that Tolkien's description of the One Ring and the events of Middle-earth seek to undermine Glaucon's point. Back to the power of the ring itself is an affront to justice, which totally makes sense since it's created by the most malicious being ever. What the ring does is exactly what the devil does in the Bible. It tempts you. In fact, another story that shows the power of temptation really well is Macbeth. Macbeth is met by 3 witches which tell him he is going to be king. After that point, the events could only be described as tragic and bloody, some even magical. But there need be no magic, because all they needed Macbeth to do was be greedy enough to take the bait. The same thing can be said about the ring. Throughout The Lord of the Rings, the ring's goal is to return to its master, constantly tricking its wearer into thinking they're getting their own way, whilst betraying them and getting back to Sauron. Some of you may see the irony in giving someone invisibility, but then undermining their safety whenever they wear it. However, the horrible reality of the ring is not that it allows Sauron to see where you are and so gets you caught. It's far, far worse than that. Think about it. A ring that constantly tempts you, what is it tempting you to do? To fully understand that, we need to take a brief look at the philosopher Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes argued that humans are selfish and power hungry, kind of like what they're described as in Lord of the Rings.
9 rings were gifted to the race of men, who above all else desire power.
And in that they constantly desire various objects. Something we can all agree is that we all must want something. Hobbes argues that these desires come from our nature and ultimately relate causally to our most basic needs, such as food, water, and shelter. So it's not something that we can easily get rid of. Not only do we desire an object for Hobbes, but we desire something greater, and he calls this felicity. Felicity is what Hobbes describes as an unending pursuit of power. The funny thing is, we do it without even realizing. I'll let Hobbes explain how. Felicity is a continual process of desire from one object to another, the attaining of the former being still but the way to the latter. This means that desire for one object leads to the desire of another. Like if you desire a car, let's say a Nissan Leaf, this desire could then propagate to the desire of something like a Tesla. Hobbes explains why this happens, saying, "The cause whereof is that the object of a man's desire is not to enjoy once only, and for an instant time, but to assure forever the way of his future desire. And therefore, the voluntary actions and inclinations of all men tend not only to be the procuring, but also the assuring of contented life. So that in the first place I put for general inclination of all mankind a perpetual and relentless desire of power after power that ceaseth only in death." What Hobbes is saying is that behind all desire is the motion set forth by our natural pursuit of pleasure and avoidance of pain, and that each desire holds within it a greater desire waiting to spring forth. Take an example of a person wanting shelter. They want shelter because it gives them freedom from the cold and other horrible things. When they get that shelter, they appreciate how warm and cozy it is and so want to keep it. So now they seek a more permanent shelter, or even weapons to stop others from taking their shelter from them. Hobbes is basically saying we are all addicted to power because power is what lets us get whatever we want and keep it. Of course, this doesn't have to be a greedy thing. Let's say we want to help the homeless, and let's say we do. Now we want to make sure that we can keep helping them, or that we can help them not be homeless anymore. Let's say we want to become the best at a sport, and so strive to become the world #1. Now we need to keep the top spot. No matter what we want, there is a desire hidden inside that desire. Because if we desire the object, then we must desire the means to achieve it. So, knowing that, what is the power of the ring? The power of the ring is to appeal to this desire for power. Temptation itself. This is why even the good guys can't handle it. Take Boromir. This guy takes arrows to the chest to protect little hobbits that he's just met. He's considered noble and just, and constantly battles to protect his people, and yet he starts to lose himself as soon as he sees the ring. Why? Because the ring offers him something that good guy Boromir couldn't refuse. The power to save his people.
Long has my father, the steward of Gondor, kept the forces of Mordor at bay. By the blood of our people are your lands kept safe. Give Gondor the weapon of the enemy. Let us use it against him. I ask only for the strength to defend my people.
What the ring does is turn good guys into bad ones. It takes their desire for good and twists and corrupts it into something else. That's why Gandalf says,
Don't tempt me, Frodo. I dare not take it.
because it doesn't matter what he does with the ring itself is still working through him.
I would use this ring from a desire to do good. But through me, it would wield a power too great and terrible to imagine.
In fact, I'd go so far to say is that this is how the ring truly brings Sauron back. It remakes someone in his image. The will of Sauron possesses the wearer, in a manner of speaking.
I do not deny that my heart has greatly desired this. In place of a dark lord, you would have a queen! Not dark, but beautiful and terrible as the dawn! Treacherous as the sea! Stronger than the foundations of the earth! All shall love me understand!
Since Sauron is a desire for power and control, all the ring has to do is convince the wearer to abandon reason for power. They reject justice and ethics as a whole. They lose themselves.
Tell me, friend, when did Saruman the Wise abandon reason for madness?
What do I mean by losing themselves? Well, as Sauron is a great example of, what someone is not just their bodily form. What they are is a combination of concepts applied to an individual which represents and creates an identity. Can you describe Boromir without Gondor or nobility? Could you describe Frodo without applying what it means to be a hobbit? What about Gandalf and being a wizard? When Boromir tries to take the ring, he loses all of the concepts of being a man of Gondor. He loses his ideals of fairness and justice and becomes twisted and malicious, rejecting concepts of property and duty which he so proudly stood for.
This city was once the jewel of our kingdom, a place of light and beauty and music, and so it shall be once more!
In taking the ring, you become nothing more than your desire for power. What better way to describe Sauron than power hungry? The ring makes the wearer into Sauron's image, regardless of whether it actually gets to the eye. This is why Sauron is the deceiver, and the ring itself is a deception. So now we've spoken about the power of the ring, let's talk about its weakness. I'll give you a hint. It's 3 feet tall and it has hairy feet. The weakness of the ring. Hobbits. So what is it about hobbits that makes the ring just another gold band? Well, let's compare hobbits to other species. Humans are described as lusting for power, hence the ring rates. Elves are described as pure and good. Dwarves are good but greedy. Orcs are vicious and malicious. Hobbits are simple.
What about breakfast?
We've already had it.
We've had one, yes. What about second breakfast?
Hobbits are described as being happy with nothing more than food, drink, and fresh tilled earth. They enjoy the little things and seem not to desire power over one another. They really don't have a leader other than for ceremony. Their police force is used for scaring away animals, and they give and receive presents happily. Hobbits are a community of people who avoid big, clumsy folk and realize that they're too small to be big players in Middle-earth. So what they sought to do is limit their worries and live in an untroublesome way. They even say not to get into trouble too big for you to handle. Since they sought to avoid trouble, they realized that desire is a troublesome concept, that people fight over things and even fight with themselves. So they made it easier by controlling their desires. How and why I will leave to another episode, but this is what makes them the weakness of the ring. No matter the temptation, the ring cannot give you more self-control from which to reject the ring from, or contentment with one's life. That's why they seem fairly unfazed by the ring.
And yet to have come so far, still bearing the ring, the Hobbit has shown extraordinary resilience to its evil.
Take Sam. The whole time he's next to the ring, which is a very long time by the way, he doesn't care for it. All he wants is to go home and to live a life of a gardener. Frodo just wants to get this all over, has a strong sense of obligation, and also desires to get back to the Shire. So after like 60 years or some incredible hardship, sometimes they break. But compared to other species, they show incredible resolve. The exceptions will be explained in another episode when I describe nature and politics of Middle-earth. Understanding the allegory, what we can learn is that to surrender to temptation is the path of self-destruction. This is what the philosopher Hegel calls the irony of the subjective, where we lose ourselves to our own desires. This is the point in which ethics is surrendered and the individual undermines themselves, their wants, and what is good for them, instead becoming a slave to an unrelenting lust for power. The individual is addicted and so loses themselves to their addiction.
He forgot the taste of bread, the sound of trees, the softness of the wind. We even forgot our own name.
What we can learn from hobbits in particular is that objects do not bring us happiness. Happiness exists around us in our basic needs and in our friends and family. If we can learn to appreciate the little things, then we can be hurt by far less and enjoy far more. Of course, there is more to cover on this topic, such as why do orcs work together? Why are men the easiest to corrupt? Why couldn't the elves just take the ring? These questions and more will be answered in the next episode of Film Philosophy, describing the politics of Middle-earth. Thank you all for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe and hit that bell for notifications for videos just like this one. If you're interested in furthering this conversation, check out my Discord server in the link below. On there you'll find that we run a book club once a month, doing various philosophical texts, and we also have weekly talks given by various thinkers. You'll also find a video request channel on the Discord, so if there is a specific topic you'd like me to cover on film philosophy or on anything else, hit me up there. And as always, try to gain some perspective.